The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
The calendar has turned to December, so that means it's time to crown a Big 12 champion. The Big 12 football season, regular season, is in the books. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry with you here on First and 12, and we are going to unpack everything that took place in the final week of Big 12 football, and it was an eventful one, as it always is, in the Big 12, and we'll be with you over the next 2 hours here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone. Alex, it's the League of Chaos, and, we didn't have as much chaos this weekend, but no shortage of storylines, of course.
Oh, to me, it's just been an entire season of chaos, really. I mean, we were trying to figure out some of these storylines for, our headlines today and all that, and you go, oh, my goodness, 14 weeks ago, where this season started off and where we had this whole thing and how dead wrong we were about the best teams and how dead wrong we were about the worst teams in this conference, and just the shock of both sides of this thing, and then the very soft, squishy middle of mediocrity of this conference as well. There's a lot to unpack on this day here, so let's jump in first with our breakdown of this BYU versus Houston game that went off last night in Provo, and another late one, another cold one. Let's kick it off right here with our BYU game breakdown.
The BYU Breakdown.
BYU takes down Houston 30-18, and it was not a pretty game. BYU did everything in their power to honestly give Houston a chance to win this football game. Around the second quarter, Iowa State not officially punched their ticket, but they eliminated BYU officially from the Big 12 championship game. And when BYU hit the halftime locker room, that clearly had an impact on this BYU team because, Alex, in the second half, when BYU was up 21-10 at the halftime break, you thought, okay, they're going to come out, they're going to just pull away from Houston. But this was a game that was 24-18. And BYU was on the ropes. They went 3 and out, and then Houston had possession, and then the tide turned as BYU forced the fumble. Jack Kelly was brilliant, and then BYU took over in the red zone on Houston's 18-yard line. But, it's kind of a strange game. And Kalani Sitake shared similar sentiments coming out of that victory. But it's kind of, how do you really feel if you're a Cougar fan on this Sunday morning? How do you feel about this game? Because yes, it's great you got to win. Yes, it's great you got to 10th victory of the season. But at the same time, you didn't get to the Big 12 championship game, and that's kind of a tough pill to swallow.
Well, and on top of it, I mean, I had a couple of friends of mine who are down there in Provo and very deep within that BYU program, and it was like, well, do you really feel like that BYU deserved to be in the Big 12 championship game just based off of the last 3 or 4 weeks? Not just the 2 losses, but really how things felt even in last night's game. I mean, 7 turnovers between the 2 teams, and Houston is expected to be pretty sloppy. But I will give credit to Willie Fritz and his guys. They showed up fired up. They had it going. They had the energy there. The chippiness was not lacking at all. If you would have had on paper, oh no, the teams that are going to fight the most in this game, it's going to be Arizona State and BYU, getting chippy in the pregame before that one, and then the next week you're going to have Darius Lassiter thrown out of the game for throwing punches. I mean, it's wild, but yeah, I mean, it was a sloppy game. It was clunky. When you have 7 turnovers like that and when you have muff punts after the defense does well. But you had some bright, shining moments from your seniors. Guys like Jack Kelly, as you already mentioned. I mean, he is just phenomenal. He caused that late fumble that ended up – it looked so weird, too, on TV. It was just getting bobbled around, getting kicked around, and it looked weird. It looked like Chris, the quarterback for Houston. It was just like – it was almost like he laid down and was just like – I'm giving up my life on this down. I'm just going to lay down here, and you guys can have the football. But, BYU had 190 yards on the ground. Jake Retzlaff was just good enough, right? 8 for 17, I think, on the night. Not a great night at all for him, but 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I guess the no interceptions but he had a lot of missed throws too, didn't he? And he had a lot of missed guys, and you had drop balls from guys. So I think the cold weather had something to do with that, but what are you going to do? I mean, you make excuses. I mean, BYU plays in the cold. They live in Provo. So all the things that added up. I mean, we're complaining about this, about how messy that game was last night for BYU. They end the season, Mitch, at 10-2. Just a wild prospect considering where we had this team 14 weeks ago.
Well, and that's a great point because getting to 10 wins is an accomplishment. And any power conference, including the Big 12, and I know Nick Saban out there can say, oh, if Ole Miss was in this league, they'd probably just, what would their record be? It'd just be undefeated. Well, this is a good football league, and to go 10-2 out of this is an accomplishment. And BYU accomplished something pretty special in that sense. But there is that kind of bitter taste of not reaching the top because, how this season started and to finish it the way they did and to play the way they did last night, that stadium was dead. 59,000 plus were in attendance at LaVell Edwards Stadium. They didn't have much to cheer about. BYU was sloppy in the red zone. They had to settle for a field goal. It was a slippery, hard surface. You saw Keelan Marion on a jet sweep slip on that third down. The turnovers you noted, Alex. And, I pointed out to you and JJ on your show on the KSL Sports Zone every day on 3 to 6 on the zone. But, Jake Retzloff, I felt like needed to close out the season with some style, with an impressive statement that I am your quarterback in 2025. And to go 8 of 19, 167, I feel like it leaves a little bit of an opening for Aaron Roderick and Kalani Sitake to say, you know what, has Jake hit his ceiling, and do we need to get another quarterback in here to push him again in 2025 or maybe get someone to unseat him next year? Because, Jake did a nice job running the football. He had 2 touchdowns on the ground. But, aside from throwing the football, it was a struggle. Now, it was interesting in the first quarter, after the first possession of the game, he goes out after that crazy fumble to open the game between Keelan Marion and L.J. Martin.
Yeah.
Jake Retzloff attempts a tackle. It was a touchdown-saving tackle on a big man for Houston. And then Jake goes instantly to the medical tent, and it looked like trainers were examining kind of his hand. And then after the second offensive series, he was there, but he goes back to the medical tent, and you kind of wonder if that was an issue for him throughout the evening. Again, Kalani, as he always does after a game, kind of downplayed the significance, but still, I think that kind of played a little bit of a role. Jake's clearly beaten up, and the stats kind of bore that out.
Let me ask you. Let me throw this at you. I had a thought during the post game last night where I was like, you know what? I bet you're going to see teams who may approach Jake Retzlaff in the offseason, and they might be tempting for him to be elsewhere from a money standpoint. I think a lot of teams see a guy like that and they go, hey, he wins a lot of games, and he's got a little bit of moxie to him. And we've seen guys who have gone to big teams for a lot less, right? Like, I mean, look, this is an example, and I've been harping this all year, so I kind of feel vindicated a little bit after yesterday, or validated in my thought. But Will Howard, he left Kansas State last year. Neither you nor I were like, oh, that guy is killer. You got to pick that guy up. Ohio State signs him up, and he looked like he single-handedly handed the game away yesterday between Ohio State and Michigan. So guys hit the transfer portal. I'm fascinated to see what BYU, who's a program who has their stuff together, who has, mommy and daddy are still together, right? I mean, this is a whole home right here. And you have people who are going to take care of you. You have a lot of stuff going on. This program's got a lot going for you. There's some talent that's going to come back. And yet you're going to see tumult in the transfer portal, and you don't know what some of these guys' personalities are going to take them elsewhere. Kalani, of course, is going to do what a lot of coaches do, which is you got to recruit the guys that you want to keep in your locker room. I would be interested to see if Jake Retzlaff actually might find a little bit of flirtations outside of the quarterback room in Provo. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but I mean, look, if somebody comes and tempts you, and if the money's good enough, and we've seen money be wild in some of these other places. Maybe he gets pulled away somewhere else. I mean, I could really see that.
No question. I mean, I think anything's possible with the portal and with NIL and, revenue share. And, that's going to be a fascinating piece to, roster construction next year. You're going to go to a 105-man roster. And, how committed is BYU to getting near that $22, $23 million threshold in revenue share?
Nobody knows what the 105 roster is even going to do. Nobody knows how that's going to treat across the entirety of college football. So how do you stay ahead of something that nobody knows how it's going to actually go?
And I think that all these players, they have every option on the table. It's funny how last night was senior day, and you saw guys like Chase Roberts. And really, honestly, you could pull out the whole roster and honor them in senior day because, honestly, all of them could leave. It's just that's how college football is. It's a very transactional-based sport now where it's not – you can't just assume, Isaiah Glasgow was an absolute stud last night. But, it's nice to think that he's probably going to be the face of your defense next year. But what if he, gets a – wandering eye, because I'm telling you, if that guy hit the portal, he's probably got 30 Power 4 conference teams ready to offer him because he's been outstanding in his combination of size and speed. He's a freak. And so BYU's got to be aggressive in roster retention, but it is interesting with Jake because you saw kind of the full spectrum of Retzlaff this season, man, because you think of those big arm throws that he showed at Baylor and against Southern Illinois. That's like the product of working with John Beck and all that extra work that he put in the offseason. But then there's the side of Jake where he's still making the disastrous throws.
Of misses.
He's still making he's still got a lot of misses. The accuracy was an issue. Last night you saw that deep ball to Darius Laster, sailed over him. He was wide open. You got to hit that. You got to make that in stride. So, it's a mixed bag. And I think, again, Jake left a little bit of an opening potentially to where BYU's got to have that conversation and maybe be looking in that market and saying, can we upgrade this position? Because right now, unless they believe McKay Hillstead is the guy of the future, and I still jury's to be out on that because in fall camp, he was very green. And I like his arm. McKay Hillstead's got a huge arm. But to say that he could be the guy that unseats Jake maybe in 2025, I don't know about that yet. Way before the season, I thought maybe there's a chance because BYU was such a dire situation, it felt like, at quarterback. But at this point, from what we know right now, with Jake having a 10-2 season, that'd be tough to say. But so this next month's going to be really important. I think this bowl prep and how they approach it, and you're probably going to get a good opponent in the bowl game, whoever you face is a power conference team. So got to make the most of your opportunity and really get better from this.
Let's take our first break. We'll come back, and we will have our sound from Kyle Whittingham, who ended the season with a win for the Utes. And we'll listen to what the coach said. Obviously, lots of questions going into this offseason for Coach Whittingham and what he's going to have to do from a personal standpoint. Is he going to stay that head coach at the University of Utah? He says it's going to be based off of what's best for the program and not what's best for him. We'll come back, listen to his post-game comments after that UCF win on Friday. Stay right here. It is it's First and 12. It's right here on KSL News Radio and on the KSL Sports Zone. It's all brought to you by Macy's. We appreciate their support throughout the season, the freshest fruits and vegetables, and your favorite local farms and brands. Macy's, happy shopping. We'll come back. More to go. 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio.